grow up, I'm gonna be a fireman. When I grow up, I'm gonna be a musician. When I grow up, I'm gonna be
homeless. It's not something I planned on being, and with your help, I don't have to be.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I am thrilled to start my morning with you. Whenever I show this little clip here, I still get tears in my eyes, my goodness, and of course I've seen it 100 times. The gentleman at the end, his name is Mark, and I always like to share a little bit about his story. I tell him, I said, Mark, I tell people that you're not a paid actor. So Mark, his story is very familiar to the folks that I've worked with for 26 years at Porchlight. So Mark was born and raised in McFarland. His father worked at the UW in the geology department all of his life until his retirement. Mark was the captain of his football team at McFarland, and he received a full scholarship to play football for UW lacrosse. And in his first year there, he started developing symptoms of a mental illness. And through medicating that with alcohol, his life just took a deep spiral, and he ended up homeless on the streets of Madison and going to the men's shelter that we run at Grace Episcopal Church. And so, running now to the present, Mark reached out and made a connection with a staff person at the shelter. He lived in our housing for a couple years, and he has now lived in his own apartment for the past 20 years. He is sober, has been sober for many years. He is stable on his mental health meds. He has a little part-time job at the Y off of Cottage Grove Road as a custodian, and he is doing very well. And so, you know, his story kind of began at the men's shelter. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. That's the original program, a ministry that Porchlight started back in 1984 after 2 people froze to death on the streets of Madison, when it was thought that we did not have an issue with homelessness. And so as faith communities have done for many, many years, a group got together and opened a facility and said, well, if you're homeless, you can show up, and that's exactly what happened. So we've been at Grace Episcopal Church since 1984. We have 70 different groups, over 1,000 volunteers that serve the supper and breakfast meals 365 days a year at the shelter. And so Wellspring, I know, has been serving for over 20 years, so if anybody knows more than that, I want to hear about it, but we've tagged you all the way back at least 20. And so, you know, as we're called here to be Christ's hands and feet, I really think the work that is being done at the shelter is exactly that. There are people who are doing the actual serving, there are doing people who contribute financially, and there are the people who make all of the food so that we can serve, you know, 90 to 140 people in the dead of winter. And so I want to thank you, all of you, for participating in that and having done so for so many years. It is just a crucial part of the ministry that we are providing. I want to share a little bit about some other things that we do at Porchlight, because what I have found as I'm talking to and meeting people who participate in our homeless ministry, they don't know a lot of the other services that we provide at Porchlight. So we have several different programs. We kind of provide what I like to say a continuum of services. So at whatever point somebody finds themselves homeless, we'll have a program that can help them. We are the largest provider of affordable housing and services to homeless and low-income people in Dane County. We have an outreach team on the streets. So we have someone who is literally on the streets and reaching out to people who are sleeping in their cars or in the woods or wherever they are on the streets. We have an outreach worker in our men's shelter, and then we have 2 in the downtown library on Mifflin Street. When the library renovated a couple years ago, instead of asking our homeless folks with all their big backpacks and duffel bags to leave, they built a space for us. And so that has been a wonderful ministry we're able to provide there. We have 330 units of affordable housing that we own. We're the property manager, and we provide the case management services. And so we provide that for families. We have 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms scattered throughout the city, and then also for single men and single women. All of our housing has support services attached to it. We very strongly believe that people are homeless for a reason, and so they need help in getting out of that situation. And many of our housing is permanent, so they can stay there as long as they want, and some of it's transitional, that it's just kind of getting back on their feet and moving out into the community. We have quite a bit of housing and services for homeless veterans. We've set aside quite a few of our units to serve that population that's dealing with a lot of mental health and substance abuse issues. But what we found that with a little bit of help, that's a group that's able to very quickly get back on their feet and then move into efficiencies in 1-bedrooms, full-time jobs, and able to be very stable and contributing members of society. We have another shelter that a lot of people aren't familiar with called Safe Haven, which is a shelter on the east side of Madison, a much smaller shelter, and that is for adults who have severe mental health issues. And mental illness is one of the leading causes of homelessness, not just here in Madison and Dane County, but throughout the United States. And so that shelter is different in that it's the only shelter in town that folks can stay as long as they need to. They can stay for up to 2 years, and we're also able to provide day services. So it's kind of a 24-hour shelter. With a lot of intensive services. Our men's shelter and then the shelters for families and single women are just 90 days in the year is how often that they get to stay there, 90 nights. Our last program that we have that is a very successful program that I love talking about, it's called DIGS, which I'm only like one of 3 people that even knows what that stands for. But it's an eviction prevention program. So it's not working with folks who are homeless, but it's working with folks who are very tenuously housed. Primarily families. We served 1,000 households last year. And so in order to qualify, they would need to receive an eviction notice. So a 5-day notice, a 14-day notice, or a 28-day notice to leave their housing, mostly because they're behind on rent. And so basically, they receive a financial gift. The average is $220. And it could be for back rent, utilities, maybe they have a job and their car broke down, and so they need a little help with car payment. And so we're able to give them that financial gift. A cool part of the program is that they match that. And so if we're able to give $200, they also give $200, so they're invested in staying housed. And then what we do is after somebody receives a financial gift, we do a follow-up survey. So at 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months, we contact the landlord with one question: are they still housed? Because that was the point of the whole gift, was that they stay housed. And in last year, in 2016, at the 12-month mark, 75% of the families were still housed, which is an amazing number because they all were on the verge of being evicted. And we have, in Madison here, we have a less than 2% vacancy rate. And so, and what is vacant, is not affordable to our families. And so if somebody has an eviction on their record, it's next to impossible to find housing here in Madison. So I love that program because the goal is to keep people housed. And so I want to thank you. I'm going to be staying after church services today, so if you have some questions or want to know how you can get involved, I know Kathy's always looking for volunteers to participate in your homeless ministry, serving of the meals at the shelter, so please jump in and get that experience if you haven't done it yet. But thank you so much for welcoming me here today.